Welcome back to the front lines. I'm Harper Vance. Today we're following the story of United States Army Lieutenant Demi Webb, an officer trained to master logistics and maintain order under fire. But when her father passes away, Demi discovers that the most dangerous hostiles aren't on the battlefield. They're waiting in her mother's living room. Faced with a predatory family trying to steal her identity and her inheritance, Lieutenant Webb is about to unleash a secret weapon left by her father called Project Omega. They wanted a war? They just picked a fight with the wrong soldier. It's time to hold the line. The operation begins right now. I checked the field watch on my left wrist. It was 1200 hours exactly. I smoothed the front of my Class B uniform, ensuring the fabric was crisp, the ribbons perfectly aligned. I was trained for chaos, for logistics under fire, but standing in front of the heavy oak doors of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in Irvine, my stomach twisted into a knot that no amount of basic training could unravel. I walked in. The air conditioning hit me first, followed immediately by the smell of searing butter-basted steaks and the overwhelming, cloying scent of Chanel No. 5. My mother's signature scent. It was supposed to be a peace offering, a family lunch. That was what the text message had said. But as I approached the semi-private booth in the back, my instincts, the situational awareness pounded into me by drill sergeants, started screaming. This wasn't a lunch. This was a kill zone. My mother, Laura, sat there looking like a grieving widow from a magazine cover. She was wearing huge designer sunglasses indoors, and next to her sat Victor, my stepfather. He was already tucking a white napkin into his collar, preparing to dissect a massive lobster. "Demi, darling," Mom said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Sit. We ordered for you." I sat down, keeping my back straight, my posture rigid. On the table, between the breadbasket and the crystal wine glasses, sat a thick manila folder. Next to it was a Mont Blanc pen, cap removed, tip pointing at me like a loaded weapon. "What is this?" I asked, ignoring the menu. Mom took a sip of her wine. I recognized the label, a Cabernet Sauvignon that cost $200 a bottle. They were drinking a fortune while my father, the man whose money they were spending, had barely been in the ground for 48 hours. "It's just some housekeeping, sweetie," she said, sliding the folder across the polished wood. "You know your father died so suddenly. He didn't have his affairs in order. We just want to make sure his assets don't fall into the wrong hands. Or get wasted." I looked down at the document. The bold letters at the top punched the air out of my lungs. Voluntary relinquishment of inheritance rights. My blood turned to ice. "Wasted," I repeated, my voice low. "You think I'm going to waste Dad's legacy?" The mask slipped. It happened in a split second. The grieving widow vanished, replaced by the predator I had known my entire life. Laura leaned forward, her eyes narrowing behind those dark lenses. "Don't play the saint with me, Demi," she hissed. "You have your army salary. You have your housing allowance. You have government health care. You don't need that house. You don't need his money. Your sister, Mia, she got into the University of Southern California. Do you have any idea how much private tuition costs?" "So that's what this is," I said, feeling a bitter laugh rising in my throat. "You're robbing Dad's grave to pay for Mia's party lifestyle." "Mia has a future," Mom snapped, slamming her hand on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "She's not like you, running off to play soldier because you couldn't handle the real world. You're selfish, Demi, just like your father was, always hoarding, never sharing," Victor chimed in, wiping melted butter from his chin. "Your father owed your mother for her youth, Demi. That house is compensation for the years she wasted on a man who drove a 20-year-old Honda. Sign the paper." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed like a stone. Victor didn't look surprised. He just smiled, a greasy, arrogant smirk. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He tapped the screen and slid it across the table toward me. It was a draft email. "I know how the military works," Victor said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honor is everything, isn't it? This is an email to your commanding officer and to the base inspector general." I read the screen. It was a fabrication, a lie so twisted it made me dizzy. It accused me of elder abuse, of manipulating the funeral arrangements to steal from my grieving mother, of financial fraud. If I hit send, Victor said, leaning back comfortably, what happens to your security clearance? What happens to that promotion you're up for? You'll be under investigation for months, maybe years. And your credit score? By the time we're done suing you, it will be 0. You'll be unhireable. Is a dusty old house really worth your career, Lieutenant? It was a masterclass in emotional terrorism. They knew exactly where to hit. They knew the military was the only thing I had that was truly mine, the only place where I had value beyond being their financial resource. I looked at them, really looked at them. The woman who gave birth to me and the man she chose over me. They weren't family. They were hostiles. I stood up slowly. I grabbed my cover, my uniform hat, from the empty chair next to me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and threw it onto the table. It landed right on top of the legal document. That is for my water, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. And for the service. Sit down, Demi, Mom barked, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. I am not signing anything, I said, looking down at them. If you want to talk to me again, talk to my lawyer. Send a subpoena. But do not ever contact me directly again. I turned on my heel, executing a perfect about-face, and marched out of the restaurant. I didn't look back at the stunned silence of the dining room. I kept my head high, my stride purposeful, walking past the valet stand and straight to my rental car parked in the far corner of the lot. I got in and shut the door, sealing out the world. The silence of the car was deafening. I reached for the ignition, but my hand wouldn't cooperate. I looked down. My fingers were trembling so violently that I couldn't guide the metal key into the slot. I dropped my hands to my lap, gasping for air, the composure of the officer finally shattering under the weight of the daughter's grief. I sat there in the parking lot of a steakhouse in Irvine, staring at the dashboard, realizing that the war hadn't ended with my father's death. It had just begun. My hands were still shaking in the parking lot, but my mind was miles away, pulled back to the moment my world ended. It was a Tuesday, 0300 hours. I was on staff duty at the base, staring at a spreadsheet when the phone rang. It was the California Highway Patrol. My father, Richard Webb, had been driving home on the I-5 freeway. He was in his 2005 Honda Accord, a car so old the paint was fading, but he kept the engine pristine. Dad always said, "Take care of your gear, and your gear will take care of you." But no amount of maintenance could protect him from a drunk driver in a lifted pickup truck crossing the center divide at 80 miles per hour. He died on impact. 10 minutes after the patrol officer hung up, my phone rang again. It was my mother. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She screamed, "Oh my God, the provider is gone. I mean, your father is gone." The provider. That was all he ever was to her. A walking checkbook. The funeral was 3 days later, and it was the most grotesque piece of theater I had ever witnessed. Mom treated the memorial service like a red carpet event. She wore a custom-tailored black dress that hugged her curves and oversized sunglasses, channeling a grief-stricken Jackie Kennedy. But Jackie Kennedy had dignity. My mother had a Facebook account. I stood in the back corner of the chapel, watching in horror as she leaned over the open casket. She wasn't just crying, she was performing. She had her phone propped up against a flower arrangement, live streaming her breakdown to her 5,000 friends. "He was my soulmate," she wailed for the camera, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. 13 years divorced, but my heart never let go. It was a lie so vile it made me nauseous. She had divorced him the moment his startup company hit a rough patch. She had kept him from seeing me for years, using visitation rights as leverage to squeeze more alimony out of him. And Victor? He was working the room. While people were lining up to pay their respects, my stepfather was shaking hands, slipping his glossy real estate business cards into their palms. "So sorry for your loss," I heard him say to a weeping aunt. "By the way, if you're looking to downsize now that the kids are gone, the market in Irvine is hot." I turned away, unable to watch them defile his memory any longer. I closed my eyes and pictured Dad, not in a casket, but in the driver's seat of that old Honda. I remembered the day he picked me up from school when I was 16. I was crying because Mom had made fun of my thrift store jeans. Dad hadn't gotten angry. He just drove us to the beach, parked the car, and pointed at the wildflowers growing in the sand dunes. "Demi," he had said, his voice calm and steady. "Your mother loves things that sparkle. But flowers in a vase die in a week. You need to be like these roots. Dig deep, hold your ground. Discipline equals freedom, kiddo." He taught me about compound interest before he taught me how to drive. He showed me his investment portfolio. Boring index funds, steady growth, nothing flashy. "Money isn't for buying Ferraris, Demi," he told me. "Money is a shield. It protects you from having to say yes to things you hate. It means you never have to depend on a man or anyone else to survive." Mom called him cheap. She mocked his brown bag lunches and his refusal to upgrade his phone. But standing there in that funeral home, smelling the suffocating scent of lilies and hypocrisy, I realized he was the richest man I had ever known. The service ended. The crowd began to disperse toward the reception hall for the free food. Mom was busy near the entrance, accepting envelopes of cash from sympathizers, her tears miraculously drying up the moment money touched her hands. I stayed by the casket, placing my hand on the polished wood. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered. "I'm sorry they turned your goodbye into a circus." "He didn't care about the circus, Demi." The voice startled me. I turned to see an older woman standing next to me. She wore a simple gray suit, no jewelry, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and dry. "Elena," I said, recognizing her. She was Dad's old friend from college, the one person Mom had banned from our house because she asked too many questions. She was also a lawyer. Elena didn't offer me a hug. She offered me something better, a nod of respect. She looked over at Laura and Victor, who were now laughing at something a guest had said, the grief performance officially over for the intermission. "Your father wasn't blind, Demi," Elena said, her voice low, barely a whisper. "He knew exactly who they were, and he knew this day would come." She stepped closer, shielding me from the rest of the room. She pressed a small cold key into my palm. "He spent the last 10 years building a fortress to keep you safe," she murmured. "He called it Project Omega. Meet me at my office tomorrow at 0900. Don't tell them where you're going. Don't let them take a single dime." She looked me dead in the eye. "He left you a weapon, Lieutenant. It's time to use it." I clenched the key in my fist so hard it cut into my skin. The pain felt good. It felt real. For the first time since the highway patrol called, I didn't feel like an orphan. I felt like a soldier who had just been handed ammunition. There is nothing more painful than seeing the people who should protect you turn into vultures before your loved one is even cold. If you felt the anger rising in your chest watching Laura and Victor disrespect a good man's memory, you are not alone. Please drop a broken heart or type "respect" in the comments below for Richard. Let's show that honor still matters. Elena's law office was nothing like the glossy, marble-floored firms in downtown Los Angeles that my mother idolized. It was tucked away in a strip mall in San Diego, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a donut shop. Inside, it smelled of old paper, strong coffee, and integrity. There were no abstract paintings on the walls, just rows of legal texts and a framed photo of Elena with my father at their college graduation. "Sit, Demi," Elena said, locking the front door and flipping the sign to "closed." She walked behind her cluttered desk to a heavy steel safe in the corner. I watched her spin the dial, left, right, left. With a heavy clunk, the door swung open. She pulled out a thick red folder labeled Project Omega. "Your father wasn't just a software engineer," Elena said, placing the file in front of me. "He was a strategist. He lived like a pauper so he could build you a kingdom." I opened the folder. My eyes widened as I scanned the documents. There were statements from Vanguard and Fidelity. There were stock certificates for Apple and Microsoft, purchased decades ago and never sold. There was a life insurance policy worth $500,000, and the deed to his house, fully paid off, zero mortgage. The total value of the estate is just under $2 million, Elena stated matter-of-factly. I gasped. $2 million? But he drove a 15-year-old Honda. He ate turkey sandwiches for lunch every single day. He did that for you, Elena said softly. She pulled out another document, a timeline of bank transfers. Do you know why your parents really divorced, Demi? I shook my head. Mom always said Dad was emotionally distant and cheap. That is a lie, Elena said, her voice sharpening. 13 years ago, your mother drained their joint savings account, $60,000, to buy a convertible for Victor. That was your college fund, Demi. Your father didn't leave because he was cheap. He left because she was robbing your future to fund her affair. The air left the room. I felt a physical blow to my chest. All those years, I'd felt a tiny sliver of guilt, wondering if maybe Dad had been too stingy. But the truth was staring me in the face. He'd worked 2 jobs, engineering by day, driving Uber by night, to replenish what she had stolen. Your mother isn't a victim, Elena said, handing me a tissue. She is a professional gold digger, and Victor is her parasite. I wiped my eyes, but the tears were different now. They weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of clarity. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Read the will, Elena urged. Specifically, Article 4. I turned the page. My father's signature was at the bottom, firm and unwavering. I, Richard Webb, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath 100% of my estate to my daughter, Demi Webb. If Demi should predecease me, all assets are to be donated immediately to the Wounded Warrior Project. And then, the kicker. Under no circumstances shall any portion of this estate be transferred to Laura Webb Vance, Victor Vance, or any of their dependents. This exclusion is deliberate and reflects the lack of support and affection shown to me and my daughter during my lifetime. Below the legal text, Dad had handwritten a note in the margins. It was a verse from the Bible, 1 Timothy, chapter 5, verse 8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. He had provided. He had done his duty. Now it was my turn to do mine. They think I'm weak, I said, my voice steady. They think because I'm his daughter, I'll roll over to keep the peace. Are you going to? Elena asked, arching an eyebrow. I looked at the folder. Project Omega. It wasn't just money. It was his life's work. It was his love letter to me. I pulled out my phone. I dialed my mother's number. Put it on speaker, I told Elena. I want a witness. The phone rang twice before Laura picked up. Demi, finally. Did you come to your senses? Is the lawyer drafting the transfer papers? Her voice was so confident, so entitled. She truly believed the world owed her everything. I'm with the lawyer now, Mom, I said. We just read the will. And? I could hear the greed in her voice, practically drooling through the receiver. How much is it? Victor found a lovely condo in Newport Beach we can invest in. You're not getting a condo, Mom, I said. You're not getting a dime. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and dangerous. What did you say? Laura whispered. Dad left everything to me, I said, enunciating every word. And he put in a specific clause to ensure you and Victor get absolutely nothing. It's over, Mom. The Bank of Richard is closed forever. For a second, there was only the sound of breathing. Then the explosion came. You ungrateful little bitch! Laura screamed, the volume so loud it distorted the speaker. You are a bastard, just like him. I gave birth to you. I own you. If you don't sign that money over, I will ruin you. I will make you wish you were never born. I looked at Elena. She nodded, her face grim but proud. Do your worst, Laura, I said calmly. But remember one thing. I am my father's daughter, and I don't negotiate with terrorists. I tapped the red end call button. The silence that filled the office wasn't empty. It was heavy with the promise of war. She's going to come for you, Elena warned. I know, I said, picking up the Project Omega folder and holding it to my chest like a shield. Let her come. I'm ready. They didn't sue me. Not immediately. Lawyers cost money, and Laura hated spending her own cash. Instead, she launched a cheaper, dirtier weapon, a smear campaign. It started on Facebook. My phone began buzzing with notifications late one Tuesday evening. I opened the app to find a photo of my mother, tear-stained and clutching a wooden crucifix, posted for the world to see. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. My heart is shattered. To raise a child with love, only to have her turn her back on her grieving mother and siblings. I asked my prayer warriors to pray for my daughter, Demi. She has lost her way. She has thrown us out on the street to satisfy her own greed. May God forgive her, because I am struggling too. I scrolled through the comments. There were hundreds of them. Her friends, women from her church group, distant relatives who hadn't seen me in a decade, were ripping me apart. What a snake in the grass, one wrote. Ungrateful child. Karma will get her, said another. Stay strong, Laura. The devil works hard, but you are stronger. They were talking about me, a lieutenant in the United States Army, like I was a criminal. I wanted to reply, to post the truth about the theft, the affair, the lies. But I knew that's what she wanted, fuel for the fire. So, I did the hardest thing imaginable. I put the phone down and did nothing. But silence didn't stop the flying monkeys, the term Elena used for the people a narcissist manipulates to do their dirty work. The next day, my sister Mia called. She didn't say hello, she screamed. Are you happy now? She shrieked. Mom says you took everything. How am I supposed to pay for USC? Do you want me to drop out? Do you want me to be a waitress for the rest of my life, like some loser? Mia, listen to me. No, you listen. You're selfish. You always have been. She hung up before I could explain that Dad had left her nothing because Mom had already spent her share on Victor's failed investments. Then came the message that broke me. It was a voice memo from Ethan, my 10-year-old brother. I pressed play, my hand trembling. Demi, his small voice wavered. Mom says you hate us. She says you want us to be homeless. Why are you being a bad person? I miss you, but... Mom says I can't talk to you anymore. In the background, faint but audible, I heard Laura's whisper. Tell her she's mean, Ethan. Tell her. Using a child as a weapon. It was a new low, even for her. The war didn't stay at home. It followed me to work. 2 days later, my company commander called me into his office. He didn't ask me to sit. He held up a piece of paper, a report from the base inspector general's anonymous tip line. Lieutenant Webb, he said, his voice stern. I received a call this morning claiming you have a gambling addiction and are displaying signs of mental instability. The caller suggested you might be a security risk. My face burned with humiliation. Sir, that is absolutely false. My stepfather, he threatened to do this. The commander sighed, tossing the paper onto his desk. I know your record, Demi. You're a stellar officer. But the Army hates drama. If your family keeps calling this base, it becomes a distraction. Fix this. Don't let your personal life compromise your command. Yes, sir, I said, snapping to attention. I walked out of his office with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Victor had crossed a line. He had attacked my uniform. For 2 weeks, the barrage was relentless. Emails, texts, social media tags. I blocked them all. I held the line. And then suddenly, silence. 3 days of quiet passed. No attacks, no flying monkeys. Just when I started to relax, an email arrived from Laura. The subject line read, Please forgive me. I opened it cautiously. Demi, I'm so sorry. Grief makes us do crazy things. I lashed out because I was scared. We are family, and family forgives. Please, let's meet for dinner one last time. Just you and me. No lawyers, no Victor. Just a mother and her daughter. I just want to see your face. I want to make this right. Love, Mom. It was a classic love bomb, the phase where the abuser tries to lure the victim back with sweetness. I read it again, looking for the trap. It was there, hidden in the desperate tone. She wasn't sorry. She was out of options. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was the same little girl who used to beg for her approval. I picked up my phone and dialed Elena. She sent the invitation, I said. The carrot is dangled. Are you going to take the bait? Elena asked. I'm going to take the bait, I replied, my voice cold. But I'm not going there to make peace. Prepare the QRF, Ina. We are going hunting. The attack didn't come with a bang. It came with a vibration on my nightstand at 3 a.m. I woke up instantly, heart pounding, hand reaching for my phone before my eyes were fully open. The screen was lit up with a cascade of notifications. Chase Bank, alert, unusual sign-in attempt detected. American Express, warning. Password reset requested. Gmail. Security alert. New device signed in. Windows PC, Irvine, CA. I sat up, cold sweat trickling down my spine. Irvine, my mother's zip code. I tapped on the Chase notification. The app demanded verification. Someone attempted to reset your password using security questions. The message read, question answered correctly. What was the name of your first pet? I stared at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. Buddy. Buddy was a golden retriever mix Dad had brought home for my 7th birthday. I loved that dog more than anything in the world. When I was 10, I came home from school to find him gone. Laura told me he ran away. Years later, I found out she had given him to a neighbor because she didn't like dog hair on her new white sofa. Now, 18 years later, she was using the ghost of my childhood best friend to break into my bank account. She wasn't just stealing my money, she was weaponizing my memories. I didn't go back to sleep. I spent the next 3 hours changing passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on everything from my brokerage account to my Netflix. By 0800, I was at work, fueled by black coffee and adrenaline. I opened my official military email, and there it was. From security-USAA-alerts at secure-server.net subject. Urgent. Suspicious activity detected on account ending in 4492. The email looked perfect. The logo was correct. The font was standard. It claimed my account was flagged for money laundering and urged me to click here to verify identity immediately. If I were a civilian, maybe I would have panicked and clicked. But the Army drills cyber awareness into us annually. I hovered my mouse over the sender's address. It wasn't USAA.com. I dug deeper, pulling up the email header. Originating IP address 192.168, ISP, Cox Communications, Irvine, CA, Victor. This was his clumsy handiwork. He was trying to fish me, hoping I'd hand over my login credentials on a silver platter. I picked up the phone and dialed the fraud department at USAA. This is Lieutenant Webb, I said, my voice clipped. I need to report an attempted breach. The agent on the other end typed for a moment, then paused. Ma'am, looking at your logs. Did you call us at 4:30 this morning? No, I said. I was asleep. We received a call from a woman claiming to be your mother, the agent said slowly. She was crying hysterically. She said you had been in a severe car accident and were in a coma. She needed access to your funds to pay for emergency surgery. The room spun. A coma. She had told a stranger I was dying, just to get a credit card number. The level of depravity was suffocating. Ma'am? The agent asked. Are you there? I'm here, I whispered, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. That woman is not authorized. She's a hostile actor. I want a verbal password on my account. The word is Omega. Done, the agent said. I'm locking it down. I hung up and went to work. I spent my lunch break calling Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I need to place a credit freeze, I repeated 3 times. No new lines of credit to be opened without a PIN. I was fortifying my perimeter. But defense wasn't enough. They had crossed a red line. They had tried to steal my identity, my money, and my sanity. It was time to stop playing the victim. I called Elena. They're escalating, I told her. Phishing, social engineering, identity theft. We can file a police report, Elena suggested. Not yet, I said. A report is just paper. I need proof. I need a smoking gun. What are you going to do? I'm going to set a trap. That evening, I drove home, paranoid, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. When I got to my apartment complex, I didn't go inside immediately. I opened a small box I had picked up at Best Buy. Inside was a high-definition, motion-activated spy camera designed to look like a harmless birdhouse. I mounted it on the balcony railing, angling the lens perfectly. It covered two critical spots: my assigned parking space and the cluster of mailboxes at the bottom of the stairs. Then, I logged into my bank app and ordered a replacement debit card. I knew the bank would mail it in a plain white envelope within 2 days. I was baiting the hook. I was turning my home into a honeypot. If Laura and Victor wanted my money so badly, I was going to give them a chance to take it. But this time, the whole world would be watching. I synced the camera to my phone, watching the live feed flicker to life. The view was crystal clear. "Come and get it, Mom," I whispered to the screen. "Come and get it." I sat in the driver's seat of a rented Ford Focus, parked 2 blocks away from my apartment complex. It was a Tuesday afternoon, hot and dry, typical Southern California weather. The rental car smelled like stale cigarettes and lemon air freshener, a stark contrast to the sterilized scent of my own vehicle. I was invisible. On the passenger seat, my iPad was propped up, displaying the live feed from the hidden birdhouse camera I had installed the day before. "Come on," I whispered, my eyes glued to the screen. "Show me who you really are." At 1400 hours exactly, a black Mercedes SUV rolled into the frame. My stomach dropped. It was Victor's pride and joy. He didn't park in a visitor spot. Instead, he pulled into a fire lane, tucked away in a blind spot where the building's official security cameras couldn't reach. Smart, but not smart enough. My birdhouse camera had a perfect view of his driver's side window. Victor didn't get out. I zoomed in on the iPad. He had a laptop open on his lap. He was typing furiously. He wasn't just checking emails, he was war driving, using a high-gain antenna to latch onto my home Wi-Fi network. Since he knew the password was my old dog's name, he was already inside my digital perimeter. 15 minutes later, the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf wrapped around her head, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. But the disguise was ruined by the flashy Louis Vuitton handbag swinging from her arm. It was Laura. My mother. She didn't walk to my front door. She walked straight to the cluster of mailboxes at the bottom of the stairs. She glanced left, then right. Then she pulled something out of her pocket. It wasn't a key. It was a tension wrench, a lock-picking tool. Or maybe a master key she had copied from my spare set years ago. With a quick twist, she popped open my mailbox. "Gotcha," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. She rifled through the mail, tossing aside junk flyers until she found what she was looking for: a plain white envelope from Chase Bank, the replacement debit card, and the paper containing the one-time password I had requested. She shoved the envelope into her designer bag and slammed the mailbox shut. Stealing mail is a federal crime. It's a felony. And I had it all in 4K resolution. But the horror wasn't over. Seconds later, my phone buzzed on the dashboard. A notification from the Chase app. Password changed successfully. Then another. Wire transfer initiated, $50,000 to account ending in 8821. It was a coordinated strike. Victor hacked the network to clear the path. Laura physically stole the verification code. Together, they reset my credentials and drained my savings. I watched the screen, feeling a strange detachment. I should have been furious. I should have driven over there and confronted them. But I didn't move. I needed the transaction to clear. Attempted theft is a misdemeanor. Stealing $50,000. That is grand larceny. That is prison time. Laura got back into the car. Through the windshield, I saw her say something to Victor. He laughed, throwing his head back. Then, he raised his hand. She high-fived him. They slapped hands and cheered, celebrating the successful robbery of her own daughter. They looked like two teenagers who had just pulled off a prank. not parents destroying their child's financial future. That high five broke something inside me. It shattered the last tiny, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, they were desperate. They weren't desperate. They were enjoying this. They were parasites, feeding on the host until it withered and died. I saved the video file to the cloud. Then, I saved it again to my hard drive. I picked up my phone and dialed Elena. "I have it," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, cold, flat, dead. "I have the video. They took $50,000. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, concern flooding her tone. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." I watched the black Mercedes back out of the fire lane and drive away, disappearing into the suburban haze. "Call the police, Elena," I said. "Call the military police, too. Tell them we have a crime in progress involving a service member. I want them arrested. Today." "Consider it done," Elena replied. I hung up and stared at the empty parking spot. The sun was shining, birds were singing, but my world had gone completely dark. The ambush was over. Now it was time for the counterattack. Betrayal is always bitter, but when it comes from the people who gave you life, it leaves a scar that never fades. Watching them celebrate my downfall was the hardest moment of my life. If you stand with me against this injustice and believe that karma needs to be served, please drop a scales of justice or type justice in the comments below. Your support is the fuel for what comes next. The house in Irvine smelled of expensive candles and deceit. When I walked in, Laura greeted me with open arms, a glass of champagne already in her hand. She was wearing a white dress, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch to perfection. "Demi," she cooed, enveloping me in a cloud of perfume. "I knew you'd come. Family always finds a way back to each other." Behind her, the scene was a tableau of suburban greed. Victor was at the wet bar, popping another bottle of Moet. My sister Mia was on the couch, unboxing a new Prada handbag, paid for, no doubt, with the money they had stolen from me hours ago. My brother Ethan was engrossed in a video game, oblivious to the crime scene he was living in. "Here," Laura said, pressing a document into my hand along with a flute of champagne. "Just a formality, sweetie. It's a gift letter. It just tells the bank that the transfer we made was a consensual family gift. You know, so the IRS doesn't get involved." She smiled, but her eyes were hard. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking me to become an accomplice to my own robbery. "You guys really went all out," I said, my voice neutral, scanning the room. Victor chuckled, strolling over. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, his breath smelling of alcohol. "See, Demi? There's no point in fighting. You're a soldier. You take orders. We're business people. We understand how to move capital. In the real world, the smart ones take what they need. The weak ones, well, they just follow rules." He patted my shoulder patronizingly. "Consider this a lesson in finance. Tuition isn't cheap." I looked at his hand on my uniform. Then I looked at him. In one swift motion, I knocked his hand away. The sound was sharp, like a pistol crack. "Don't touch me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. "And you're right, Victor. I am a soldier, and in the Army, we have a rule. Never let the enemy leave the kill zone alive." "Excuse me?" Victor stepped back, blinking. "I brought something for the party," I said. I pulled my iPad out of my bag. "Do you mind if I use the big screen?" Before they could answer, I tapped the screen mirroring button. The massive 65-inch TV above the fireplace flickered to life. "What is this?" Mia asked, looking up from her bag. "A home movie," I said. "Press play." The video started. The 4K resolution was unforgiving. It showed Victor's black Mercedes pulling into the fire lane. It showed him hacking my Wi-Fi. Then, it cut to Laura. The room went dead silent as they watched themselves on screen. Laura, in her ridiculous disguise, picking the lock on my mailbox. Laura stealing the bank envelope. Then came the finale. The high five. The laughter. The celebration of theft. On screen, digital Victor and digital Laura were cheering. In the living room, Real Victor dropped his champagne flute. It shattered on the hardwood floor, shards of glass and expensive wine exploding everywhere. Laura's face drained of color. She looked like a ghost. Demi, I can explain. Explain what? I asked, stepping closer. Explain grand larceny. Explain federal mail theft. Explain identity theft. That's $50,000, Mom. That's a felony. We needed it, she shrieked, her mask crumbling. The market turned. We were going to lose the house. You have plenty. You're single. You don't need it. I don't care what you need, I said coldly. Turn it off, Victor roared, lunging for the remote. It's too late, I said. I'm not the only one watching. As if on cue, the front door burst open. I hadn't locked it behind me. Police! Nobody move! 4 officers from the Irvine Police Department stormed in, guns drawn. Behind them were 2 military police officers, their armbands identifying them as federal authority. Pandemonium erupted. Victor, the brave businessman, tried to bolt for the patio door. An MP tackled him before he took 2 steps, slamming him face first into the carpet. Victor Vance, you are under arrest. Laura stood frozen, shaking uncontrollably. An officer grabbed her wrists, pulling them behind her back. The metallic click-click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. No! No! Laura screamed, thrashing as they marched her past me. Demi! Tell them it was a gift. I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. I stood still, watching her. I remembered the Bible verse Dad loved, but another one came to mind. Matthew 10:34. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. The truth was my sword, and I had just swung it. You gamed the system, Mom, I said, looking her in the eye as the officer pushed her toward the door. But you forgot one thing. I am the system. You ungrateful brat, she spat, her face twisted in ugly rage. I curse you. I curse you. Save it for the judge, I said. And good luck in prison. I hear the orange jumpsuits are terrible this time of year. They dragged her out, her screams fading into the night. The house was suddenly quiet, save for the sobbing of my sister Mia on the couch. I looked around the empty room, at the shattered glass and the spilled champagne. The party was over. The war was won. But as I stood there in the wreckage of my family, I didn't feel happy. I just felt clean. The San Diego Superior Court is a massive, intimidating building of glass and steel, designed to make you feel small. But as I walked up the steps for the sentencing hearing, I didn't feel small. I felt 10 feet tall. I wore my Army service uniform, the dress blues. Every ribbon, every medal, and every insignia was perfectly aligned. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I was representing not just myself, but the values of honor and integrity that my father had instilled in me. Inside courtroom 4B, the contrast was striking. On the left side of the aisle sat Laura and Victor. Gone were the designer clothes and the arrogant sneers. Victor wore a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit. His real estate license had been suspended pending the investigation, drying up his income instantly. Beside him sat a public defender, a court-appointed lawyer, the ultimate sign of financial ruin for a man who used to brag about his net worth. Laura looked even worse. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked old, tired, defeated. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. She was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. She sat down, opened the file, and looked straight at the defendants. We are here for the sentencing in the case of People v. Vance, she said. Charges include grand larceny, identity theft, and mail fraud. The prosecutor played the video one last time. Seeing it on the court monitors was different than watching it on my iPad. It felt colder, more clinical. When the clip of the high five played, Laura burst into tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. It wasn't my idea, she shrieked, standing up and pointing a shaking finger at Victor. He made me do it, Your Honor. He said if I didn't get the money, he would leave me. I'm just a victim here. I'm a weak woman. Victor's jaw dropped. He turned on her instantly, his face turning purple. You lying witch! You stole the key! You came up with the plan. You said your daughter was too stupid to notice. Order! Order in the court! Judge Harrison banged her gavel, but the damage was done. The entire room watched in disgusted silence as the perfect couple tore each other apart like rabid dogs. It was pathetic. I looked at them and felt a strange emotion. Not anger, not hate, just pity. They were hollow people, crumbling the moment the pressure applied. Lieutenant Webb, the judge said, turning to me, would you like to make a victim impact statement? I stood up and walked to the podium. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady. They stole $50,000 from me. In the grand scheme of things, money can be replaced. I can work. I can earn. I paused, gripping the edges of the wooden podium. But they stole something I can never get back. They stole the last shred of hope I had that I had a family. They used the memory of my dead dog to hack my bank account. They used my father's death as an opportunity for profit. They didn't just break the law, they murdered the mother I thought I had in my memories. That is a crime no sentence can truly punish. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, her eyes soft with empathy. Thank you for your service, Lieutenant, she said quietly. Then she turned her gaze back to Laura and Victor. Her eyes hardened into flint. Laura Webb Vance and Victor Vance, she announced. Your actions were predatory, calculated, and morally bankrupt. You targeted a member of our armed forces, your own daughter, for personal gain. She looked down at her notes. I hereby sentence you to 3 years of probation. During this time, you will complete 500 hours of community service. Laura let out a small gasp. Specifically, the judge continued, you will be assigned to the Caltrans Highway Cleanup Crew. You will pick up trash on the side of the very highways you used to drive your luxury cars on. Perhaps manual labor will teach you the value of honest work. Furthermore, regarding the civil suit, the judge added, under California law for financial abuse of an elder or dependent adult, I'm awarding treble damages. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $150,000 to the plaintiff, plus all legal fees. And finally, she signed the paper with a flourish. I am granting a permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with Demi Webb for a period of 10 years. If you text her, call her, or come within 100 yards of her, you will go to prison immediately. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Victor mumbled. Laura just sobbed into her hands. The gavel banged. Crack. It was over. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I passed my mother, but I didn't look at her. She was a ghost now, a stranger I used to know. Outside, the California sun was shining. I walked to my car, got in, and shut the door. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to want to cheer. But as I sat there in the silence of the parking lot, surrounded by the noise of the city, I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty quiet. The war was over. The enemy was defeated. But the battlefield was still scorched earth, and now I had to figure out how to live on it alone. The war was over, but peace didn't feel like I thought it would. It didn't feel like a parade. It felt like emptiness. I returned to my apartment and took down the birdhouse camera from the balcony. I boxed up the hard drives containing the evidence. The threat was gone. Laura and Victor were entangled in a web of probation officers and community service schedules, but the house felt too quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Mia. Are you happy now? The message read. Mom and Dad lost everything. They have to sell the house to pay you back. We're moving into a rental. I hope you're satisfied, you selfish bitch. I hate you. I stared at the words, feeling a sharp pang in my chest. Mia was 19. Old enough to know better, but young enough to still be under Laura's spell. She didn't see me as a victim. She saw me as the villain who blew up her comfortable life. I typed out a reply. I didn't do this, Mia. They did. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then, I deleted it. There was no point. You can't explain color to someone who has been taught to see only black and white. Instead, I tapped the three dots in the corner of the screen. Block caller. I set the phone down. It was the final amputation. The limb was infected, and I had to cut it off to survive. But God, it still hurt. I needed to talk to someone who would understand. So I grabbed my car keys and a six-pack of Coors Light, Dad's favorite cheap beer, and drove to the cemetery. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the rows of headstones. I found Dad's plot, the grass already starting to grow over the fresh earth. I sat down cross-legged, popped the tab on a beer, and poured a little onto the ground. "Hey, Dad," I whispered. "I did it. I protected the fortress. Project Omega was a success." The wind rustled the trees. "But I don't feel good," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I put Mom in handcuffs. I made Mia hate me. I feel like I'm the bad guy." The dam broke. For the first time since the highway patrol called me that night, I let go. I didn't cry like a soldier, silently and efficiently. I cried like a daughter who had just become an orphan. I sobbed until my chest ached, letting the tears wash away the armor I'd been wearing for weeks. The next morning, I made an appointment at the base medical center. Dr. Aris was a civilian psychologist who specialized in PTSD. She listened quietly as I poured out everything: the ambush at the steakhouse, the theft, the court case, the crushing guilt. "I feel guilty," I told her, wringing my hands. I backed them into a corner. Maybe if I had just given them some money, none of this would have happened. Dr. Aris leaned forward. "Demi, listen to me closely. You didn't push your mother off a cliff. She jumped. All you did was refuse to be the mattress she landed on." She let that sink in. "That's not cruelty," she continued. "That's gravity. You are not responsible for the consequences of her actions. You are only responsible for your own safety." Those words were the key that unlocked the final chain. I wasn't the villain. I was just a person who finally said no. I left her office with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I drove straight to a brokerage firm downtown. "I want to liquidate the portfolio," I told the financial advisor. He looked shocked. "Everything? Lieutenant, these are blue-chip stocks. Apple, Microsoft. The capital gains tax will be significant." "I don't care," I said. "Sell it all." I didn't want to look at those statements anymore. I didn't want the money that had caused so much pain to sit in an account, gathering dust. I wanted to transform it into something new. I took the proceeds and started looking at real estate listings. Not in California. California was too loud, too bright, too full of ghosts. I looked north. I found it 3 days later. A small cedar-shingled cabin on the coast of Oregon. It was surrounded by towering pine trees and overlooked a gray, churning ocean. It was isolated, it was rainy, it was peaceful. It was the kind of place Dad had always talked about retiring to. A place where he could fish and read books and not worry about keeping up with the Joneses. I put in an offer, full asking price, cash. As I signed the electronic documents, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was leaving the battlefield. I was leaving the wreckage of the Vance family behind in the smog of Irvine. I was going to build a new life. A life defined not by what I fought against, but by what I stood for. "Pack your bags, Demi," I said to the empty apartment. "We're going home." 1 year later, I stood in front of a platoon of fresh-faced recruits at Fort Jackson. They were barely 18, terrified, and homesick. But today I wasn't teaching them how to dismantle a rifle. I was teaching them how to dismantle a predator. "Listen up," I barked, pacing the front of the classroom. The enemy isn't always on the battlefield holding an AK-47. Sometimes the enemy is waiting for you in your own living room, smiling, asking for your signing bonus. I clicked a remote, and the logo for the Richard Shield appeared on the screen behind me. "This is a nonprofit organization I founded," I told them. "We provide pro bono legal defense for service members facing financial abuse from family. If anyone asks for your bank password, if anyone tries to guilt you into signing a loan, you call us. We fight for you so you can fight for your country." Using a third of my inheritance to start the foundation was the best investment I ever made. Every time we saved a young private from a predatory uncle or a narcissistic parent, I felt like I was high-fiving my dad. My own predators had met their fate, not through my vengeance, but through their own choices. Elena gave me the update over the phone a few weeks ago. The news was grim, predictable, and oddly satisfying. Victor had divorced Laura 6 months after the trial. Without her access to my dad's money, she was useless to him. He ran off to Nevada with a 25-year-old cocktail waitress, leaving Laura with nothing but debt. To pay the court-ordered restitution, $150,000, Laura had to sell the house in Irvine. The market had dipped, and after paying off the mortgage and the lawyers, she was left with pennies. Now, the woman who used to mock service workers was working as a cashier at a discount supermarket. She lived in a studio apartment in a rough part of town, taking the bus to work because her Mercedes had been repossessed. She was alone. Mia had stopped talking to her, blaming Laura for the loss of her tuition. When I heard this, I waited for the rush of joy. I waited to feel triumphant. But it never came. Instead, I just felt a quiet, distant pity. I didn't hate her anymore. To hate someone, you have to care about them. I had reached the state of indifference, the true opposite of love. Thanksgiving arrived with a crisp chill in the air. My cabin in Oregon was everything I had dreamed of. The smell of pine needles and salt air filled every room. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting a warm glow over the long wooden dining table. There were no blood relatives at my table. My mother wasn't there. My siblings weren't there. But the house was full. Elena was there, carving the turkey with surgical precision. 2 of my fellow drill sergeants were arguing playfully about football in the corner. A young corporal named Jackson, the first client the Richard Shield had saved from a bankrupt father, was helping set the table, laughing at a joke. I looked around at them. This was my chosen family. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." These people had shown me kindness, loyalty, and respect. They didn't want my money. They just wanted my company. "A toast?" Elena called out, raising her wine glass. Everyone stood up. "To Richard," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The man who played the long game and won." "To Richard!" Everyone cheered, clinking glasses. I took a sip of wine, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. I excused myself and walked out onto the front porch. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before me, gray and wild and endless. The wind whipped through my short hair, cold and invigorating. I reached under my sweater and pulled out the dog tags hanging around my neck. They were Dad's tags from his service years ago. I ran my thumb over the raised letters of his name. Webb, Richard. He had lived a quiet life. He drove an old car. He ate sandwiches. He was mocked and belittled. But in the end, he had saved me. He had given me the tools to cut the chains, the weapon to fight the war, and the resources to build a peace that would last. I looked out at the horizon, where the gray sky met the gray water. "You were right, Dad," I whispered into the wind. "Discipline is freedom." I let go of the tags, letting them settle back against my heart. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, untainted air of my new life. And I am free, Dad. I am finally free. Demi's journey reminds us of a powerful truth. True wealth is not measured in luxury cars or designer handbags, but in the freedom to say no to toxicity. Richard Webb taught us that love is not just a feeling, it is an act of preparation and protection. By living with discipline, he built a fortress for his daughter's future. Furthermore, this story proves that family is not a life sentence of obligation. It is a title that must be earned through mutual respect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is cut the ties that bind you to pain, so you can finally be free to build a life of peace. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to set a hard boundary with a family member to protect your mental health? Or perhaps you have found your own chosen family who supports you unconditionally. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to hear today. If Demi's courage resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story about resilience, justice, and the power of the human spirit. Thank you for listening.